Were you recording this today?
I just started.
Okay, awesome. Good. Thank you.
You're welcome. So, yep, here's the first meeting, and then Chris, I think you're first. Did you have any resources or anything you needed to share? Or you're just gonna do a screen share?
I'm going to do the screen share, but before I do that, so I kind of wanted to know what everyone's comfortability was with programming so that I don't go over stuff that we don't need to go over. So um, I don't remember from like all the introductions. Does everyone at least have like a basic concept of different programming languages from other courses?
I do.
Okay.
I do.
Okay. Like JavaScript, or has it been something else that you've taken?
I've taken C++, JavaScript, Java. I'm taking Python right now. I've done CSS,
Yeah.
dabbled in all that front end web development stuff.
Okay.
I've done software engineering projects, so I've messed around with Node.js, PHP,
Okay.
a bunch
Christine,
of other.
I know you had
Uh,
mentioned you.
yeah, I've taken like one programming course that was pretty basic, and then I took a front end web design course. So I've worked a little bit with like CSS, JavaScript. I My final project for that class was to like build a basic website, um, and so that's about as much as I have. It's pretty bare bones, but I can take notes, and I don't mind looking stuff up too. If I get lost, I'll just ask.
Okay. So the reason I ask is because there was some stuff in JavaScript that kind of, I'll be honest, it kind of threw me off a little bit. I don't do much with web development. Um, Most of my courses I've taken have been in C++ and in Java. And so some things are different. And so I was going to point some stuff out, but it sounds like most people are more up to speed on the web development stuff than I am. So maybe I don't need to go through all that. Um, So in any program language, these are pretty basic: while, do while, for, the different loops that you can use. Um, Even the syntax is pretty much the same from what I'm used to with other programming languages. It's pretty simple. One thing I noticed that I either haven't been exposed to before or was different and might be specific to JavaScript is the for in loop of being able to go through all the different properties of an object. And we'll get to that in a second with different examples in the code. Um, but I think before I do that, maybe I'll share my entire screen. That would probably be better. Okay, so let's go to some code examples here. So this code, and I'll share this with everyone at the end too. I just have it really basic. It just has headers and then paragraphs with different identifiers. And then when we get into the JavaScript, which in HTML is all kept between the script tags. So you have, let's see, so for the loop section, it's pretty simple. Does everyone know what a for loop does and how it works?
I do.
Yeah, I do.
Okay. So for loop's pretty basic, probably like the most commonly used loop out there. So the for in loop was different for me. So in Java or in JavaScript, we have objects where we can assign different properties to them, and they can be different data types. And that mixing of data types was something that's I'm still getting used to. But here I just used all strings, and so the for loop or the for in loop is set up where we have this text that we just continuously keep adding on to, and then we add on each position in the object, each property, and eventually we have a string that's built in the text that just, Chris drives a truck. It's pretty simple, but that's something that was new to me. So the conditional statements we have when we're doing comparisons or we're doing loops, we have equal to, not equal, greater than, less than, greater than or equal to, less than or equal to. We have a ternary operator, and we have, these are newer ones to me as well, the equal value and equal type. Since in JavaScript, you can compare different data types to each other, but also see if they're the same type. Again, that's something I'm getting used to because in languages I've used before, you don't do that. It can't compare a string to a number. It explodes. So,
what is a ternary?
So ternary, and I haven't looked it up just in JavaScript, I'll be honest, but in other languages, it essentially checks to see, like it's either or. That's the only time I've ever used it, is it switches between two different values. It checks and then it goes one way or the other. I don't know how, I'll be honest, I don't know how that works in JavaScript. I'd have to look into that further.
Like an inline if statement? Is that?
That's how I've seen it work. But
I've seen it work that way in other languages, and I knew it was part of JavaScript, but I don't know the exact syntax.
That's the way I've used it in other languages. I have not used it in JavaScript. I kept this very basic.
Yeah.
I would imagine it's the same because the other syntax is very similar in JavaScript to the other languages. Of course, like things change, but I would imagine that the operators are pretty consistent. If anyone else knows, feel free to chime in. Because like I said, JavaScript is pretty new to me. The functions work pretty much the exact same way that I've used them before. The difference being that functions are declared with the function keyword instead of like a return data type or anything like that you might see in other languages. To declare a function, you literally just say function, you give it a name, you give it the parameters, and then the code is in between the brackets. So functions are called in a few different instances when an event occurs. So since we're using websites, like if you click a button, when it's invoked or called from the code itself, or automatically when it's self-invoked. So if we look at some examples of functions. So if I just have like a super simple function to add these numbers together, these are going to be my parameters, and this is, so the return is literally just, it adds that and it returns that value. You don't have to declare the data type, even from like what you're calling or where you're calling it, you don't have to declare that. So like here where I've actually called this function, nothing in that involves me declaring that I'm using numbers versus strings or anything like that, which is simple. And it's kind of nice, but it still is odd to me that you can just do that and not have to worry about what you're passing to it. And these are some areas I wanted to point out where but you might get hung up. So in JavaScript, it does not check to see if your parameters match up. It doesn't check to make sure you have all the parameters included. It doesn't do any sort of data type checking. So if you pass it a string where it's expecting a number, it's not going to tell you, or necessarily explode right there. It might just do something weird. Where in other languages it would just not even execute. It's not going to do anything. So just be careful when you're passing things to functions to make sure that you're passing in the right place you think you are. So variable declaration works a lot like in other languages where you just use the assignment operator to store data. The two basic ways of thinking what you can store in JavaScript are numbers and strings. It's pretty consistent with a lot of different things. There are other data types, but it's very easy to think like that. When you declare a variable, you literally just say var and then whatever you want to call it, and then what the value is. Again, this is different from other languages where you don't declare the data type when you declare a variable. You can declare multiple variables in a single expression, just separate them by a comma, and then when you're done declaring them and assigning them values, you put a semicolon. If you don't declare anything, it's going to be undefined. So we talked a little bit about parameters. They are just the names listed in the function definition. The argument is the actual value pass. So if you hear argument versus parameters, just know that one means the name listed in the function definition, one means what you're actually passing to it. Again, doesn't specify data types, doesn't check types of variables or check number of arguments received. If it's missing, it just is undefined. So if you pass two arguments to that function that's expecting 3, the third one is just going to be undefined. So arrays are also very similar to other languages. One of the big differences, again, is that they can hold multiple different data types. You can also push onto an array, which I have never done in other languages. Other languages, you have an array, it has a set defined size, And if you want to change that, you have to, I mean, it's harder than just saying push onto it. So
It's more like a combination of array, list, vector.
So it's kind of weird. Like, to be honest, I don't like that they call them arrays, because to me, it's like this freakishly weird morph data type.
Because it could even be a hash map.
It can. Well, that's something weird too, right? When we get into associative arrays.
Sorry.
Like, well, no, I mean, it's good. Like, you can't. So an associative array technically doesn't exist in JavaScript, because if you have an array, you reference the data in it by index. So when we think about like an associative array, we're generally thinking, okay, we have a name of some value that we're trying to access, and that's how we reference it. In JavaScript, there's a workaround for that, which I'm going to show, but it's not technically an associative array. Technically, they don't support those, so it's kind of weird. If you use name indexes, JavaScript redefines that array to a standard object, and I think Christine has the JavaScript object lesson, I want to say. So I'll let her take over what that is and how that works. But yeah, so if you try and use it that way, you just get weird results. And that's something I've noticed with JavaScript. It's like, there's no definite, like, it explodes here. It's just like, it's going to do something weird, and you'll figure it out.
It's really loosey-goosey.
It really is. So one thing I want to touch on where you might run into errors with declaring arrays. So in a lot of other languages, you declare an array and you need to give it a size right away. And just to say, this is how big the array is. Again, in JavaScript, you don't do that, and you declare it two different ways. We're going to talk about two different ways. You put the values in it as literal values. So if you want to put strings or numbers or whatever in there, you can do that in between the brackets. And then you can also create an array with a new keyword. So on W3 schools, which is where I got the majority of this information, it cautions people not to use the new keyword, because it can complicate code, but you also get kind of weird results. And so as an example of that, this array, the first array, it works how you would expect an array to work. It creates that array with those 6 different numbers in it. There's literal values, and it's done. The second example creates an array with those values in it, kind of like how you would expect, but then the third example creates an array with just 4 objects in there that are all undefined. So if it's a single number in there, it doesn't just create a new array with the value of 4, it creates a new array with 4 different elements that are all undefined. So if you can help it, just stay away from it, especially because you have the push function apparently with arrays in JavaScript, where you can just add on to it, and it just adds it to the end. So let's see if there's anything else I need to cover with that. You can also, to start at the beginning, you start at 0. To start at the end, you start at length, -1. You can also push, if you just push at the length, that gives you the next value if you need to, or if you want to reference that. So let's look at the associative array workaround. So this is technically not an array. This is an object where we have just basically given it keywords or properties, I guess, and just assigned values to them, and we reference them this way. So it kind of works how you would think, or how you would expect an associative array to work, but it's technically an object. So yeah, just keep that in mind. So I just have some pretty basic examples. I'll go through the code of just establishing variables. This is about as basic as you can get of a for loop. It literally just counts and changes the value of n, and then it displays the value of n at the end. And then I just added a while statement that if it's odd, it's going to show that. So this just goes, like I said earlier, this just goes through that object, creating that string. This creates a random number between 0 and 9 using the random function. These were all just looked up on W3 schools. I'll be honest, I don't know what floor does. I just know it's necessary to use the random with the 10 multiplier, because if you just do math.random, it comes up with a decimal or a number between 0 and 1 rather. It doesn't come up with a full integer. But anyway, so then I did an if statement to where if it's, if it's even, it displays that. If it's odd, it displays this. And then if it's 0, then it just displays it 0. I also just did a simple switch statement just to show how that syntax works in JavaScript. That's the same exact syntax I've always seen with switch statements, so that's really nothing new. And then again, the variables and parameters, I just, I set up all the variables in one line. I threw them to the add numbers function. It returns a value that's used in this string, so that's pretty simple too. And then the arrays we went through. So yeah. So I'll show you what that all looks like. Let me refresh. This is my highly skilled CSS styling right here. So it's pretty simple. I just have it separated by headings. Obviously that string needs a little bit of work, but it's pretty simple. Are there any questions about any of the syntax or anything I went over that we can talk about?
No, I think it's a pretty good review.
Yeah.
All right. Well, in that case, I will turn the time over to Christine.
Does it have a timestamp? I don't think so. Because I think, aren't you supposed to? I don't know.
I am, but I'll just have to go back and find it. It's 10:22
Yeah.
right now. I don't know what time we started.
I think we started 5 after.
Okay.
So around 15 minutes in, 17 minutes in.
Okay. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay.
Yes.
So let me pull this up. Give me just a second. Sweetheart, you've got to go to bed. I'm in my meeting right now. Good night. Okay. Sorry, I've just got a black screen, so I don't know what my computer's doing.
Yeah, you froze up.
Okay.
There you go. Oh, it's thinking about it.
Okay, sorry. I have
There we go.
my internet is not that great. I live out in the boondocks.
It's all right.
Okay. So I was kind of refreshing myself with all of this because the last computer class I took was like a networking class, and so I fell out of code for a while. So I just tried to stay as basic as I could with everything. So object creation was the first. I don't know. Are you guys there still?
Yes.
Okay, it went away on mine because I clicked on
Sorry.
something else. Okay, so creating an object, we even saw in Chris's presentation that there were some objects in there, and this is just pulled from W3 because that's most of the easier stuff. That's where I found it was just easier to understand. So this is just like a simple little example of code. And this, the variable with this would be a basic object. I actually have the return stuff in here, but that's not part of it really. And I also have it'll let me navigate in between stuff. This is my GitHub where the examples that I have here are a little different than the ones that I've used on the PowerPoint. But I'll share the link to this in case anyone wants the code. And I've kind of got notes in here so that this different stuff is separated. And I will share the PowerPoint as well so that I don't have to go through all of the specific definitions because this one is pretty simple. And so next I covered the properties, the name value pairs in JavaScript objects. These usually are variables that are used internally in the object methods. So we see the property, one side, the property value would be like here, first name, Tom, last name, York. And, you know, we can put as much information in as we need to. And I used the same similar method that was from W3 on here. And I don't specify an example of this on the GitHub because it's just kind of, I didn't know what else to cover about it besides just basically what it is. And so when I got to functions, it's basically a block of code designed to perform a particular task and is executed when something invokes or calls it. So in this example, it's another one from W3, and the one on my page is different. But this one just performs like a simple mathematical function. It just multiplies the two numbers. You can fill it in down here, what you want it to be, or you could even define it in your object if you wanted to. So this, like if you run this in code, it's just going to show the number 12 because it's just going to multiply 4 times 3. So they can get a lot more complicated. But again, I was just trying to keep it simple because we sort of get an idea and then build on that. So to go back, let me show you. My example of a function on here was I used like a window prompt button that will come up on the page. This is something that I worked on in my first programming class that I was familiar with, and so I used it again. And it's pretty simple. Down in the bottom, I have
Christine.
Yes.
All I see is a black screen. I don't see anything.
Yeah.
I see your mouse, but that's it.
Okay. Have you seen the GitHub page at all?
No, just the PowerPoint.
I don't know how to. Okay. Well, then you know what? I'll just go over the PowerPoint and then I'll try to share that after, because I guess I'm just navigating on my computer. And I'll just go back over it real quick. So then I'll move on to methods. From what I could see, methods are functions stored as object properties, and they let the object do something or do something to it, basically. So in this example, I used the keyword this to return it because from what I could tell, that was how, like in this example, it says the code, this is the person object that owns the full name function. So, sorry. So they're often referenced with the keyword this, and it refers to, you know, the owner of the function. So this is another really basic example, and I have a different one on the page. The thing I had the most trouble with, I think, was inheritance and instantiation. I found a lot of conflicting information when it came to this. But basically, it's the two kind of relate, and that's why I put them in together. Because I remembered hearing of the classes sort of taking from one another, like the parent and child in HTML. And so this is pretty much the same here. You would want to create a constructor, which is kind of like a blueprint so that you can keep pulling from the same one without having to add on to it. All JavaScript objects inherit properties and methods from a prototype. The prototype is in there by default, and you can add methods or properties to it. So these are just the different parts in here. You see we have the constructor, which would be our first object, basically, and we add the properties to it. And then we have a method to return, and down here is where we have instances. So this is pulling, it inherits all of the methods and properties from variable X up here. We're just like creating new instances of it. So everything that I could find on instantiation referred to this. And basically all of this is being inherited from the parent part, or the top of the constructor. So on this slide, I gave some different examples that I found for instantiation, because there were different methods that are used and different websites that I searched and different videos that I watched. It seems like people have an idea of what's best. Everyone sort of uses it differently, and some people have different names for it. Like there's the videos that I was reading said that often the prototypal method will be used and called classical. I don't know. And so pseudo-classical, from this reference that I put in, I have a reference slide at the end here that has all of the stuff that I used for the presentation, that this was the most commonly used one. And it's just pretty much like the other ones that we looked at. It has the constructor, the first object, and everything down here is able to pass information. So you just create your variables basic like this. You don't actually name them up here, because then you can keep adding on. And I'll share this PowerPoint because I don't expect people to, just go to the links from it. But this YouTube right here, this channel, I don't know how to say that, but this guy has tons of videos, and this was probably the most helpful to me because he starts at the most basic levels and he builds up so you can kind of pick whichever topics you need help with. And so I'm going to try to share the screen now for my GitHub page.
I think you have to change it in Zoom.
Yeah, that's what the mistake I made before. Okay.
There you go.
There
Okay.
it is.
Okay. And again, please forgive me if all of this is just like way too simple for you guys, or if I'm not explaining it well, because I studied this for like a couple of weeks and I tried really hard to get the information, but my understanding of it is just not that great.
Well, object-oriented programming is kind of difficult to wrap your mind around if you haven't played with it before.
Yeah. Yeah, are these, so like an object in JavaScript, is that sort of like a class in other languages? Or is it?
Kind of. It's more broad than a regular class, because an object, like, I'm pretty sure a function is a type of an object, and like you said, arrays can turn into an object. Yeah. And so it's like it's more encapsulating and fluid, because you can predefine objects in JavaScript, but like she showed, but
yeah,
even after you do that, you can create a new one and then modify it once it's already been created and add in new functions just by, you don't have to like, and yeah, you don't have to initiate new fields or new variables or functions. You just you do the class name dot, or the object name dot, the variable you're wanting to add, and then equals, and then you can put whatever the heck you want. So I mean, it kind of is. It can perform the functions of a class, but it's more than just.
Yeah. Yeah, because you can define functions within the object, right?
Right. Yeah, and have them predefined within the object, but then after that you can keep adding on additional functions and variables, and it's weird.
It's like an object you can add on to for some reason.
Yeah, other languages that's not a thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, see, I haven't used a whole lot of other, I've done like HTML5 and then like some CSS and stuff, but that's pretty much it, and very basic JavaScript. So, and that was like a while back, so I'm trying to refresh myself on all of it. And from my understanding, it's the instances and the inheriting that kind of makes it easy to add more stuff in. Is that right? Or
yeah, and just the function of the language. Like, instead of having to redefine the object multiple times, like if you have a bunch of objects that have similar functions and variables, you can create one instead of creating a whole bunch, and then pull from it multiple different times for each different place you're using it. And then if you have to make a change, you only have to make a change once, and it just makes it easier to build on top of it.
Okay.
If that made sense.
Yeah, no, it does. Sorry, you probably know more about what I'm teaching than I do. It sounds like it. Okay, so this is just the code, and I haven't, it's still really ugly because I haven't created like a front page with links and all of that. I didn't realize that we had to do that until just a few days ago. I saw that he said that. So starting at the top, my example for just a basic object started here. And the function that is that, no, yeah, the example of a function, this is where I used the window alert that pops up, and it has a little button that says hello, and you click on it, it asks you your name, and then it responds with a greeting. So after I go over the code, I guess I'll just bring up the page real quick to show you what it looks like. The method that I used here, I pretty much just used information about a band that I listened to for all of it so that it just stayed on topic, I guess. And for this one, it just is like a mathematical equation that's pulling his age and subtracting a certain amount of years from it to show how many years that his band has been, how many years ago it started. And it's really easy to change and manipulate whatever you want for your own code. And my inheritance and instantiation is kind of all together. I added in some albums as the instances that were, it has, the function album, and then from here is where I added in the different albums, and then I have where it reads out calling the variable hail.name, hail.year. And so this down here is where the button is actually put into the code. That was the function part of it. And let me share my really exciting, super awesome page here. I don't know if I'm doing this right. Can anyone see this?
Yeah.
Okay. So this is how it reads out. This is where my method that did the mathematics 32 years ago, and it has the message with it, the button if you click to ask the question. And then this is where it pulls the title and the year that it came out of the album, where it's inheriting from the original object, the album, and pulling out the title and the year. And that's pretty much all that I have. It's all super basic, and it's hopefully enough that if you didn't understand the concepts before, that you might be able to. Are there any questions about it?
No, I think that was good.
No? Okay.
Yeah. Thank you. Alrighty. So good. It was like 20 minutes almost on the dot.
Okay.
So let's see if mine goes that long. All right. Okay. Okay. I think that's right. You guys see the presentation?
Yes.
Okay. How do you start it? I don't think I've ever. Oh, there it is. Okay. All right. So I was doing JSON, or which is special for JavaScript object notation. A JSON is a tool that you can use in JavaScript that allows you to turn a JavaScript object into a string. And then what that does is it allows for easier communication of data between a client and a server. And so it simplifies the transition, because instead of having a complex structure of a complex structure of information and variables, you just have a very long string that gets sent out. And then so it's more of a it simplifies it, and then you can also use it as storage. So you can use, like, there's no SQL databases that are built entirely on this concept, where your database is nothing but just a very long text file, pretty much, built off of a JavaScript object. And so your JavaScript object is what's holding all this data, and you can access the JavaScript object by going deeper and deeper into variables. In the last one, we saw that you could make a variable on an object by saying the object name dot the variable name, and then within those variables you can turn those variables into more objects that can go deeper and deeper and deeper depending on how complex you needed your data to be. And so a JSON file or a JSON object would just be that object represented in a text format. And so here is some example code. This is what a JSON object looks like. the syntax is fairly similar to a JavaScript object, except when you're declaring a variable, it has to be within double quotations or double quotes. Whereas normally it wouldn't, if you take those quotes out, then it becomes a JavaScript object if you don't make it a string, which is what these single quotes are doing. So if you took the single quotes and the double quotes out of the variable names or the object name, then it would make it a JSON object declaration. So it's fairly similar. You can come in here and you can kind of see what's going on. This is an object, and within the object it has a string value, a number value, an array value with those are populated there, a Boolean value, and Boolean, yeah, so, and then it can also be null. It can hold null values. Things that JSON has trouble storing is down here. Functions are hard. You can do it, but there's some extra steps that I didn't really go into. It'll convert them to text, and then it's really hard to get your function back out of text. There's some JavaScript voodoo you can do to actually do it, but I didn't read up on that yet. But it is possible. Dates, you cannot store like a date variable type. Those are not supported. And undefined, you should not use undefined variables while using JSON. So if you wanted to take a string, a JSON string, and turn it into an object, all you'd need to do is use JSON, which is JSON, dot parse, and then pass it in the string, which is this is a function, and it converts the string into a JavaScript object. And so that'll return a JavaScript object, which you can assign to a variable and reference later on. And so JSON data here is in this for loop. And so it'll go through JSON data, which is this object here. And so it'll go into the JSON object and then go into this array. And then for each value in the array, it's going through this function and appending it to a string. So it's running through each one. And so you can see that's how you access the different variables once they've been turned back into a JavaScript object. You can treat it just like you would a regular object. So again, this is the money right here on how to convert from a JSON string back into a JavaScript object. And if you wanted to turn a JavaScript object into a JSON string, rather, you're going to come down here. Okay, JSON stringify, and then pass it the object or data that you wanted it to turn into JSON format, and it'll return a string. And so in this one, I have a few different input fields up here, a string input, a number input, a Boolean import, but the Boolean's not working for some reason. I didn't know how to get the value out of a checkbox. I looked and I couldn't find it. But anyways, it adds those values into a JavaScript object right here. It takes the value out of the input and puts it into this JSON data.string variable. .number variable gets the number value. The Boolean value would get the checkbox value if I could get it to work. And then that object is converted into JSON format using JSON.stringify and then passing it the object. And then from there, it'll alert or show, it'll do a little pop-up and show you your object that you made. And so I'll open this. You guys can see this?
Yeah.
Okay. So here's the information from the JSON object. The array of no-nos, don't use. There's your functions. There's the dates and undefined. And then down here, if you wanted to make your own object, 50, and then you hit the create button and it shows you what the string looks like once it's turned into JSON. So
how does it know when you parse it? How does it know where to delineate the information?
Oh, commas, sorry.
Okay.
So a comma will separate it, as well as, well, it's also like, where are we? I can't see there we go. So if you take right here, so, oh, it's kind of a bad example because it goes way off screen. Right here. So our object right here is, at this point, you're saying, I want an object variable or an object with the following information inside of it. And so in there, I have a string variable separated by a comma, a number variable separated by a comma, and then an array. And this is how the colon is how you assign a variable to a value to the variable.
Okay, gotcha.
So the format would be double quotes, the name of the variable, double quotes, and then this is like the assignment operator here. And then whatever your value is, whether it's a number, a string, an array, another object, a Boolean, true, whatever it is, you can have that follow your assignment operator and then separate each value by a colon.
Okay, cool.
So, and then you need to, like any other assignment, you need to end it with a semicolon. So any other questions?
So when that creates that JSON object, essentially, it's literally just a string of text with commas separating the different values.
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay.
So you can do the same thing with JavaScript. Like if I take this here and then, and took out the double quotes around each declaration and took the single quotes off the ends, it would be a JavaScript object.
Okay.
This is another way to declare JavaScript objects. So these curly braces are a way to say, hey, this is an object. And so there's
cool.
I guess this is a little bit different for me because last time as far as I remember, last time I had done anything on JSON, it was importing a library and working with JSON from there.
Yeah.
So I've never seen it worked this way.
I agree. I think in other classes I've used JSON libraries before, but I think JavaScript has a built-in JSON functionality for parsing and stringifying JSON objects. Because I mean in my website here, I didn't add any additional libraries or anything, and it worked. So I know a lot of APIs will use like other applications like YouTube and Twitter and stuff use JSON. They'll send you a JSON formatted object, and you'll have to parse it once you get it. And so it's pretty common. So, alrighty.
Cool.
Any other questions?
There's no need
Is that
for
David?
for a server when using JSON.
Pardon?
No need for a server using the JSON.
No, you don't. I didn't. This doesn't utilize a server communication to do it, but normally it is used as a communication tool. So it's usually either between applications or between client server kind of communication, not just storing data on your page. But you could use it for that.
I think it's most, like you were saying, I think it's most commonly used for that communication between either different languages sometimes, or even different like systems, because in a lot of you guys are web developer majors, I think. Maybe not all of you, but like in one of the software classes where you create like an application in Android, one of like the first assignments is communicating with Twitter to pass a JSON object to get like the username and like a tweet. And it's pretty basic, but that's what they use to communicate between the two systems.
Right. Yeah, I remember that. That was Java, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
You were using Java to get a string. And I know in Java you had to import a JSON library, right?
I think so, yes.
I'm pretty certain.
You do, yeah.
So, but yeah, I think in JavaScript it's built in.
Yeah.
So you don't have to worry about importing libraries or any of that jazz. Cool. Did anyone have any trouble getting web pages hosted on the internet so the professor could see them?
No.
Question. Okay, we're good then. Alrighty. Any other questions for the group?
The only thing that I had was on your site where you have it set up as like the buttons and everything, where you switch between different sites. I had to look that up, but is it in your code, like an example for me to see there?
You're talking on this guy?
Yeah, like the home page on that, where you had to actually go and click to get the example page. So I haven't taken a web development course in probably 2 years. Stuff like
what are you using to host?
I'm using GitHub Pages.
Oh, I haven't used GitHub Pages, but normally, if you wanted to link to another page, you would use. There's a link object which is A, so it's the HTML tag A, and then if you 1 second here, let me. Tag list. So you're going to use this link here, and instead of putting in a actual URL, it would be the file address in relation to
the repository. Yeah.
Right.
Okay. Cool.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I probably could look that up. I just figured it'd be easier to ask.
Yeah. No, it's right there. So not a problem.
So I figured that's the only questions I have. If anyone else has any.
Oh, I was going to ask, do you guys mind if I make, do you want to do channels for resources, like where we can post our
I think so.
presentations and stuff, just so if anyone has any questions that they know was covered in the video or in the presentation, they can go back and look at that reference real quick.
Yeah, I think that would be a good idea.
Do we want to
Okay.
do a separate channel for each topic, or do we want to do?
I just thought it would get kind of messy
Yeah,
after a while.
right. So just like one channel for all of our presentations and all the resources.
I would say.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So, and then if anyone has any like specific questions you're struggling with during your fluency stuff, feel free to post them in Slack, and I'm sure we'll be able to help each other out on those.
Now, I guess is the fluency, do we have to do that? Is that just towards the end of the semester that we have to do that, or we have to do that after every teaching?
It's throughout the course. So your personal plan,
Mm-hmm.
did you remember that assignment?
Yeah.
That is what you should go off of for submitting or getting with the teacher and showing them your progress on a certain topic. And so like for this week, I was going to submit fluency for variables, objects, or the basics of objects and JSON.
Yeah.
And so what that is you kind of make like an example site that showcases kind of like how Chris and Christine and I have an HTML page that kind of demonstrates what I've learned and what we've learned from each topic.
Yeah.
Have one of those that you've made, and then get with the teacher and he'll go through it and look at the code, look at the page, and kind of grade you on how well you understand the topic.
Okay.
And then he'll give you feedback on what to study and if you did anything wrong or what you did good or stuff like that. And then you can revisit each topic after he gives you feedback and improve your fluency in each topic.
Okay. That's what I thought it was. I just didn't know. I don't recall there ever being like any deadlines or anything like that we had to follow with that.
No, it's kind of just make your own schedule.
Yeah.
Just have to get it done before week 14.
Yeah. I think if you're done by week 10, 11, you start working on a project. Like if you passed off your basic fluency in all the topics, then you start working on a project. Else you get a C as your max grade and you continue working on fluency the remainder of the course. So try and get them done sooner.
Man.
Good. All right. Good job, you guys.
I was going to say that I'm going to share the link for my GitHub, but I'm also going to be working on it. I'm not removing any code that's there, but I'm going to be adding like a front page in with links and stuff. So if anyone wanted to look at anything that was there, it's just, the code will still be there somewhere that I showed tonight. I'm just going to be making it look better.
Yeah. Mine was pretty bare bones too. So I still need to make the homepage.
Yeah.
So, all right, guys. Thanks for coming. And if you have any questions, post them in Slack.
Awesome. Sounds good. Thank you.
I'll get with Christine on how to post this video somewhere, maybe YouTube or something, so it's available. All righty.
All right.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks. Good night.